Live from Melbourne, this is 7's Afternoon News with Mike Amor.
Good afternoon. First at 4, we have breaking news coming in from the state's southwest where a tree has fallen on a car. Melina Saris is in the newsroom. Melina, what do we know so far?
Mike, rescue crews are trying to remove two people who are trapped in a car which has been crushed by a very large tree. The incident happened around 2 o'clock this afternoon in Gellibrand, which is around an hour and a half from Geelong in the Otway Ranges. Paramedics who were on their way to the scene had a tree crash down in front of their ambulance on the road. That area has had some of the highest gusts of wind in the state, more than 130 kilometres an hour, which is the equivalent of a Category 2 cyclone. And severe winds of more than 100 k's an hour are expected to continue this afternoon. The SES has received 1,000 calls for help over the past 24 hours. 800 of those are for trees down and the rest are for building damage.
We've still got another at least 12 hours of the existing conditions here in Victoria before there might be a period of reprieve ahead of, again, stronger damaging winds on Friday into the weekend. And so all Victorians need to be prepared.
We've just received an update too from energy providers about power outages. They say they're working to restore electricity to more than 24,000 homes and businesses across Victoria. Emergency services expect there to be hundreds more calls for help this evening as people arrive home from work and school. Mike.
Melina, thank you. Now to Melbourne's east. Here's Sarah Jane Bell in Upwey.
More than 100 homes were damaged in the extreme weather overnight. Here in Upwey, a massive branch fell from one of the trees and smashed onto the roof of this house, actually punching a hole in the roof and damaging a room inside. The noise, well, that woke up the homeowners at 1 o'clock this morning. They ran out in shock, but say it's only this morning that they can really see the extent of the damage. Now, it immediately cut power to this house. They're hoping that that will be restored today. But this is one of more than 15,000 properties that energy companies have been working to restore power on over just the past day. SES crews have also been working around the clock, responding to more than 600 calls between 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon and 9 o'clock this morning. Crews were kept extremely busy in Glen Waverley, where a tree crashed through the roof and into a lounge room at 5:30 this morning. The homeowners telling 7 News there was a massive rumble as the tree came crashing down and they ran for safety. The structure damage so bad the SES have been unable to tarp the house. The homeowners worried about what rain damage could come next.
It is significant damage and it has impacted this family quite significantly. Obviously it would be a lot worse if they were in the room at the time.
The Warragul and Emerald areas were hit hardest and a severe weather warning remains in place for much of the state, with damaging winds expected to cause more havoc today.
Sarah Jane Bell there. Let's go straight to 7 News meteorologist Jane Bunn. And Jane, where are we up to with this cold front?
Well, Mike, the second in this series of fronts is through the Melbourne area, now heading across eastern Victoria. That puts us in a vigorous westerly airflow. We still have a few hours of danger before conditions ease. Here are the biggest wind gusts so far. Avalon, St Kilda, South Channel Island have all just clocked 100 k's an hour. Point Wilson off Geelong, 102. Further west, Mount Gellibrand hit 133 k's, 104 at Aries Inlet. The biggest in Victoria so far, just off the coast at Hogan Island, 145 k's an hour. These winds are now easing from the west, should only be experienced in the Melbourne area for the next hour or two, and then conditions ease back. But we do have abnormally high tides and damaging surf to go with these squally showers. The inundation at the Gippsland Lakes may last around until 7 p.m. tonight, Mike.
Jane, is there more to come?
Well, we do have high pressure that is on its way in. Now, high pressure has been limiting the amount of rain we've been seeing, but this case, it is good for us because it does make those winds ease. By about 8 o'clock tonight in Melbourne, I'd expect those winds to be gusting 25 k's an hour, so much, much less than what we're experiencing out there now. We do have a bit of a reprieve tomorrow, but the next cold front is coming back on Friday, Mike.
Oh. Not much of a break. OK, Jane, thank you. And Jane will be monitoring the weather throughout the hour. Now to the rest of the day's news. Friends and strangers have banded together to support the families of two Melbourne boxers after their shock deaths overseas. 24-year-old Vincent Atulia and 25-year-old Andrew Kolovas died suddenly while on holiday in Vietnam. The cause of their deaths has not been revealed, but GoFundMe pages have been set up to raise the money needed to bring their bodies home. The teenage boy pinned down by Michael Voss after a crash in Hawthorn yesterday has been freed on bail. The Carlton coach tackled the 16-year-old and held him until police arrived. He's accused of being inside a stolen Mercedes that lost control and flipped on Barton Street. The boy was charged with theft of a motor vehicle and possessing a controlled weapon. A second teenager is still on the run. Dozens of Uber drivers have gone on strike at Melbourne Airport in the first of a series of protests for better pay and conditions. The drivers taking part in the demonstration called on their Uber colleagues to join them. Uber slashed fares by 3% in Melbourne on August 21. One more hostage kidnapped by Hamas on the 7th of October has been rescued. As Raymond Dale reports, his family rushed to the hospital where he was taken by authorities.
The moment freedom arrives for a hostage held by Hamas for 326 days. Israeli special forces escort Kahid Fahan El-Qadi to safety. He had been held in a tunnel in a remote area of the southern Gaza Strip. The sunglasses protect his eyes after so long underground. The 52-year-old is a member of the Bedouin community in southern Israel. He was taken hostage on October 7th. From a kibbutz where he worked as a security guard. When his brothers learn of his rescue, they race to be reunited with him at the hospital where he's being checked over. Thank God, says this brother, after 11 months, news that we didn't imagine and didn't dream of. Al-Qadi took a phone call from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and spoke of the others waiting to be freed. He's just the 8th hostage to be rescued alive. 108 remain in Hamas captivity. And until they are released, the war on Hamas continues. And more lives are lost in the Gaza Strip. A Palestinian family, the latest to fall victim to an Israeli rocket attack. Ceasefire negotiations moving way too slowly for the people of Gaza and for the remaining hostages and their families. Raymond Dale, 7 News.
Home and Away star Lynn McGranger has revealed she's had surgery for an overactive thyroid. The 71-year-old, who has played Irene Roberts on the show for more than 31 years, expressed her relief after undergoing the procedure. It was a long time coming. We were incompatible and, quite frankly, I was exhausted, she wrote on social media. She went on to thank all the staff at the Mater Hospital in North Sydney. In good news for consumers, inflation is easing in Australia, dropping down to 3.5% in July. But it's still not low enough for interest rate cuts. Let's go live to Josh Martin at Parliament House. Afternoon, Josh. What caused inflation to ease?
Good afternoon, Mike. The biggest fall came from electricity, down 5.1%. It's the first time it has dropped in 3 years. Of course, the federal government's energy bill rebate started in July, as well as various state government power discounts. Dairy products and furniture prices also fell. The most significant price rises were rents, food, alcohol, tobacco and fuel. Since these figures were recorded, though, petrol prices have now hit a 13-month low, and some more good news there. The key underlying inflation figure, which the Reserve Bank watches, also fell today, down to 3.8% for the month to July. But earlier this month, Governor Michelle Bullock told mortgage holders not to expect rate cuts for at least the next 6 months.
Michelle Bullock may not necessarily want investors or just the general population to get too excited about rate cuts coming through. Inflation still is above that target band of 2 to 3%.
This is a promising result and our policies are helping, but we need inflation to moderate further and faster.
Mike, the cost of living is dominating federal politics, and this afternoon Greens leader Adam Bandt has called for a Robin Hood tax, a 40% tax on the profits of big corporations, including mining companies, which he says would raise around $500 billion over a decade. The Greens say the funds would be given back to everyday people, but big business has savaged the idea.
People who are struggling to keep their head above water are going under, pushed down by billionaires and big corporations that make massive profits.
This would be economic vandalism. We are already the second highest tax jurisdiction in the OECD.
Mike, Labor has ruled out the plan, accusing the Greens of making up numbers.
Josh Martin in Canberra. Josh, thank you. Succession planning is underway at Collingwood, where President Jeff Brown has told the club's board he intends to step down. The Age reports Brown won't walk away until he's satisfied the club is in good shape for his successor. His departure is expected in the next 12 months. One Victorian politician has brought a cake to Parliament to mark a sad milestone for our city. Hear from him next on 7 News. Plus what Woolies' latest profit result says about Australia's cost of living crisis. We'll be back in just a few minutes, live from our Dockland studio. A Victorian MP has marked a sad milestone with an outlandish cake. Libertarian member David Limbrick brought a cigarette-shaped dessert to Parliament today to highlight 100 tobacco-related arson attacks nationwide since March, with the majority here in Melbourne.
Happy arson, Victoria. Happy arson to you. Hip hip kaboom, hip hip kaboom, hip hip kaboom.
For more, we're joined live now by David Limbrick. David, thank you very much for your time. A very concerning milestone indeed. What needs to be done to stop, or at the very least, reduce these tobacco turf wars?
It's very clear to me that governments, both federally and at a state level, are focusing on the outcomes of organised crime rather than the root causes. What the Libertarian Party believes is that the root cause is excessive federal tobacco excise tax, and also we need to legalise vaping for adults. This will take these markets out of the hands of organised crime and reduce this criminality that we're seeing at the moment.
David, should we force these tobacco shops to be regulated, come under regulations, just like drive-through bottle shops?
I know that we've heard lots of talk about that, but actually the facts are that many of these tobacco sales are not actually done at tobacconists. There are many different shops where they're sold at, where illegal black market tobacco is sold at, and simply regulating tobacconists will mean that the organised crime will just sell them at different outlets. I don't think it'll have make much of a difference at all.
No innocent people have died so far as a result of these fire bombings, but are you concerned that it's only a matter of time? I think we had one very close call last week.
Yes, we had a very close call last week with some children that suffered only minor injuries, but it's only blind luck that no one's been killed yet. It's only a matter of time before innocent bystanders get killed. We have to stop these arson attacks. The way to stop it is through the power of economics, and that is through undermining organised crime, through lowering taxes and also legalising vaping for adults.
Who needs to move first, the state government or the federal government?
Look, I would like the state government to make more noise about this. I feel that the state government understands that a lot of this is driven by federal policies, but ultimately it's the state government and the people of Victoria that have to put up with the consequences of this. The Victorian government and Victorians in general need to be making more noise about this and complaining to the federal government that we need change here and we need it urgently before someone gets killed.
David, it seems like there is no kind of urgency to this, despite this becoming a weekly event. Why is that?
I don't know why there's not urgency, and that's what drove me to try and raise awareness of this issue and why we did what we did today. It is an urgent issue. As you say, there's almost weekly, sometimes daily fire bombings that happen here. We need to put a stop to it. Now, the idea that we're going to just sort of law enforcement is going to enforce our way out of it is not going to work. We need to act urgently, and I don't know why the government isn't paying more attention to this. They absolutely need to. The federal government needs to step up and take serious action on these to undermine the incentives that are driving organised crime.
David Limbrick, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Woolworths has released its annual results revealing things have fallen flat, their profits barely moving the last financial year, banking $1.7 billion. The supermarket giant says more of its customers are now shopping online than in-store.
In e-commerce, we've seen our customers even be more savvy in how they find value. They can search our specials a lot easier.
Today's report was the last delivered by Brad Banducci as the Woolworths boss prepares to hand over the reins to Australia's largest supermarket on Monday. A life-changing treatment will soon be within reach for around 1,700 Australians living with advanced breast cancer. It'll become available on the PBS next month. As Amelia Mulcahy explains, there's not a minute to lose.
Around 20,000 Australians are diagnosed with breast cancer each year, and today's announcement is set to make the treatment Inertu available to hundreds more living with it in its advanced stages. It targets a specific protein found within metastatic breast cancer cells. That protein's known as HER2, with this particular treatment previously only subsidised for those with unusually high levels of it. Today, though, an announcement that those with lower levels can access the treatment under the PBS too.
Really is absolutely a very active drug, and I think all oncologists around Australia will be very keen to see if their patients are eligible to receive this treatment.
And I can't stress enough the importance of a listing of this type of drug on the PBS, because although these new cutting-edge treatments that are being developed all the time across the world are giving new hope to patients right across the disease spectrum, they are very expensive.
Someone who can attest to that is Sarah Lee. She's been on Inertu since 2022, and in that time it's cost her and her family more than $200,000.
I know I came home and shed a lot of tears, you're just trying to work out how you're going to pay for it.
The treatment will be available to newly eligible patients from the 1st of September.
Sport is next with Theo Doropoulos, including details on the latest Premiership Tiger who wants out of the club. Plus, the story of goodwill after 2 children had their lemonade stand robbed. 7 News continues in just a few minutes. Theo Doropoulos is here with this afternoon's sport. And Theo, tell me this is not true. There's going to be no one left. Another Tiger is on the move.
You've got to hang in there, Mike, as it'll turn around soon. Now, Liam Baker today has informed the club of his desire to return home to Western Australia. The dual premiership player held his season-ending exit interview with Adam Uze this morning, where he told him he would like to be traded to either Fremantle or West Coast, with the Eagles the likely destination. Meanwhile, Dan Rioli didn't want to elaborate on his desire to join the Gold Coast Suns.
Have you had fun at Richmond?
Oh, I love the club. They're good.
Do you think you'll be here next year?
You're definitely coming back for a holiday, chilling, taking it easy.
It's expected Richmond will ask for pick 6 from the Suns as part of any deal. Well, the Hawks are back at work for the first time since locking in their spot in September. James Sicily's preparing for his first finals appearance in 6 years as the club look all but certain to land a massive fish in the trade period. Star Eagles defender Tom Barrass requesting a move late yesterday.
Pretty excited by that prospect, but a lot of water to go under the bridge still, and that's exciting that players are seeing Hawthorn as somewhere they want to be.
Star midfielder Will Day is a test to return for their clash with the Dogs. He's still nursing a collarbone and shoulder injury. Well, Swans captain Callum Mills says their form against the Giants counts for little next week. Sydney has beaten GWS in both the games they've played this season, but it is a whole new ball game in the qualifying final.
Clean slate. We got massive respect for Giants. They've been playing really good footy the last sort of month. Their form's been unbelievable, so we'll lock in and do what we need to do.
The game is a sellout at the SCG. The AFL is adamant it won't be moved to Olympic Stadium to accommodate a bigger crowd. Let's go overseas now. Thanasi Kokkinakis is celebrating the biggest win of his Grand Slam career. The Aussie knocked out former world number 3 Stefanos Tsitsipas in the first round of the US Open. Tsitsipas battled a rib injury as Kokkinakis charged to a 4-set victory. It's just his second win from 6 appearances at Flushing Meadows.
I've had a lot of tight losses when I've been in winning positions, so that one's just all relief and, yeah, it meant a lot.
10th seed Alex de Minaur was one of 5 other Aussies to advance on day 2, bringing the total to 10. Darius Seville's frustrations boiled over after a 3-set loss in her opening match. The 30-year-old says she's considering retirement. Brodie Kostecki's long-awaited exit from Erebus Motorsport is all but confirmed. The reigning supercars champion is set to replace Anton De Pasquale at Dick Johnson Racing from next season. De Pasquale has signed with Team 18, who have axed former champion Mark Winterbottom. Magic, that's our sport for the afternoon. More to come tonight, of course, the trade period heating up, some blockbuster news out of some big clubs. We're still sort of 6 weeks away from the deadline day of the trade period.
So much for long contracts. They mean nothing these days.
Absolutely.
But anyway, thank you, Theo.
All right, Mike.
A community has rallied around 2 children whose lemonade stand was robbed in the US. A man posing as a customer made off with the children's jar of money containing $60. When locals heard about the brazen theft, they rallied to help the pair, flocking to buy their homemade lemonade. Thanks to their generosity, the young entrepreneurs earned themselves more than $9,000. It's approaching 4:30 here on 7 News. Our top stories are straight ahead, including the latest on our wild weather. We're tracking the cold front. Paramedics forced to call another ambulance for backup. They say because a hospital refused to treat a patient. We'll explain what a new indictment means for Donald Trump. And the unlikely pairing pushing for a total ban on jumps racing here in Victoria. We're back live from Melbourne in 2.5 minutes.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7's Afternoon News with Mike Amor.
Good afternoon again. We are tracking wild weather this afternoon with warnings of more damaging winds. As we go to air, we're following breaking news from the state's southwest where a tree has fallen on a car. Melina Saris is in the newsroom. And Melina, we've just received an update.
Mike, tragically, we've just learnt that the male driver has been killed and his female passenger has been airlifted to hospital in a critical condition. Rescue crews worked for almost 3 hours to free the pair who were trapped in their car, which was crushed by a very large tree. The incident happened in Gellibrand, which is around an hour and a half west of Geelong in the Otways Ranges. Paramedics who were on their way to the scene had a tree crash down in front of their ambulance on the road. That area has had some of the highest gusts of wind in the state, more than 130 kilometres an hour, which is the equivalent of a Category 2 cyclone. And severe winds of more than 100 k's an hour are expected to continue this afternoon. The SES has had 1,000 calls for help over the past 24 hours. 800 of those are for trees down and the rest are for building damage. More than 24,000 homes and businesses are without electricity, with energy providers now working to restore power. Emergency services expect there to be hundreds more calls for help this evening as people start to arrive home from work and school. Mike.
Melina Saris live with that update from the newsroom. Let's go straight back to meteorologist Jane Bunn. And Jane, where are we at?
Well, Mike, squally showers are currently crossing the Melbourne area, and while the rain isn't much, they do have intense gusts of wind. We're seeing our winds spike just over 100. St Kilda has just screamed up to 107 k's an hour. This here is the last bit. We only have this severe weather for an hour or two more. By 8 p.m, the wind will be more like 25 k's an hour, less than a quarter of what it is out there now. We've had 2 fronts move through. The winds were ferocious as the first front approached around midnight. At 2:30 a.m, it was a highly unseasonable 20 degrees in the city. It dropped to 14 soon after. Then in a lull in the wind, we reached 18.6. Then the next front hit with the ferocious winds this afternoon. This part comes with these squally showers. It'll bring down trees but doesn't add up to much in the rain gauge. What it does do is let the temperature plummet. At 4 p.m, Avalon had fallen to 10 and it felt like -2. Now it's recovered to 0. It was 27 there on Sunday. This is a huge change. In our fight between hot and cold air, we'll see more of these strong and gusty cold fronts. Here are today's. Here is the next one approaching. I'll have more details on that in the Outlook shortly.
OK, we'll see you in 20 minutes. Jane, thank you. An investigation into an unprecedented health emergency has been ordered after paramedics were forced to save a woman's life inside a hospital corridor. The specialist crew was called to attend an urgent cardiac patient at Maroondah Hospital because there were no beds available in the emergency department.
It just highlights the incredible work our paramedics do. This incident will be reviewed. I've learned over many years not to jump to conclusions, and I'm waiting on a chronology in relation to exactly what happened. And it will be the subject of a review. With response times, we're all aware of a number of issues around that, whether it's ramping in hospitals, whether it's call taking and dispatch. So it's a systems-wide issue that we've actually got to look at, right from primary health right through to what's actually happening at the hospitals themselves.
For more, we're joined by Victorian Ambulance Union General Secretary Danny Hill. Danny, thanks for joining us. Have you ever seen a case like this before?
No, I don't think we've seen anything like this ever happen before. It's not uncommon that small regional hospitals may call for ambulance support for a patient that might need an escalated level of care at a different hospital, but a major metropolitan hospital needing paramedics in their corridor to call from intensive care paramedics to treat a patient that could very easily be treated in the hospital emergency department. I don't think we've seen that scenario happen before.
Are you concerned this could become a trend of paramedics having to step in and take over more often as hospitals reach capacity?
Look, I think that already is a trend, that we're seeing paramedics actually working sometimes the majority of their shift in a hospital corridor, but actually treating patients in the hospital corridors.
Why are the emergency departments so full? What are the factors at play there right now?
Look, there's no question that our colleagues in the hospitals are doing it tough as well. They're busy, they often don't have enough beds, and their workers are, pretty exhausted after a busy couple of years. But we understand that there's a lot of patients that could quite easily be offloaded into the waiting room. There is a Department of Health guideline that's circulated to the hospitals that where a patient is fit to sit in the waiting room, that should occur. But some hospitals just refuse to do that. And sadly, it turns into almost a combative sort of relationship between our members and the hospital staff who are trying to do the best for their patient. But what ambulance services are for, they're an emergency service. They need to get back out into the community to respond to genuine emergencies. They are not designed, they are not employed to work in hospitals. They're designed to treat the patients in the community, and they're actually being obstructed from being able to do that.
So, Danny, what's the solution here?
Look, I think this is really where government needs to step in. The hospitals need to prioritise ambulance offload so that the crews get back out on road as quick as they can. But it's really about, for Ambulance Victoria leadership, it's about reaffirming that AV is an emergency service. That's what taxpayers want from their ambulance service, to be able to respond to them in an emergency. And we hear of a lot of conversations where our paramedics take patients into the emergency department and the patient says, "Why are you still here? Why aren't you back out on road?" And they're quite shocked to hear that the paramedic crews do continue to work in the hospitals.
Ambulance Victoria has a new CEO, a face familiar to most Victorians, Andrew Crisp. Do you think he will make a difference? Is he making a difference?
Look, initially, we've met probably around 4 or 5 times with Andrew Crisp in the past 4 weeks, which is probably more than we met with the previous CEO in about 2 years. So, look, what we've called for is new leadership, and that's more than just changing one individual. That's about, the board, the executive, about everyone involved having a rethink in the way that they lead the service.
Danny Hill, thank you very much for your time, as always.
Thanks, Mike.
Prosecutors in the United States have moved again to charge presidential candidate Donald Trump with plotting to overturn the 2020 election. The charges carry a maximum penalty of 55 years in prison. Here's US correspondent Tim Lester.
Donald Trump will make his run for this year's presidential election in early November, with his behaviour after the last election in 2020 still a live issue in America's courts. Prosecutor Jack Smith has issued a new indictment or formal charging document accusing Trump of enlisting allies to help him claim victory in battleground states, in fact won by rival Joe Biden. Also pressuring his Vice President Mike Pence to reject the legitimate votes from those states. Eventually, in the cauldron of the January 6 riot, Pence refused to comply. The federal case stalled when Donald Trump appealed, claiming a president had immunity from prosecution. The country's highest court largely agreed, ruling former presidents could not be prosecuted for official acts. Now, the prosecutor has trimmed the original charging document, but kept 4 charges against Donald Trump.
I don't think that it's changed anything legally. I think it's clearly an effort to try to do more election interference from Jack Smith.
It remains highly unlikely this could go to trial before the November election, but it does potentially put the case back in court as Donald Trump campaigns. Also, confirmation today that Democrat candidate Kamala Harris will hold her first TV interview since her presidential bid began. She and her vice presidential pick Tim Walz will sit down for the interview the day after tomorrow.
A former racing minister has joined forces with the Animal Justice Party in a new push for a total ban on jumps racing in Victoria. Details next on 7 News. And see the new handheld device that could revolutionise how Alzheimer's disease is diagnosed. You're watching 7 News. We're live across Victoria. Former racing minister Rob Hulls has today joined forces with Animal Justice Party MP Georgie Purcell to campaign for a ban on jumps racing. It comes after 3 horses were euthanised and 2 jockeys injured at Ballarat last Sunday. They spoke with Nick McCallum.
With me at Parliament House is former Deputy Premier and Racing Minister Rob Hulls and Animal Justice Party MP Georgie Purcell. So, Mr Hulls, you've come out today, you're supporting Georgie's campaign against jumps racing. Why?
Enough of the carnage is enough, Nick. The fact is that those involved in the racing industry need to realise that the number of deaths of horses this season and serious injuries to jockeys is tarnishing the entire racing industry, and this carnage just has to stop.
And of course, sadly on Sunday in Ballarat, 3 horses had to be put down, 2 jockeys were injured. Was that the tipping point?
Absolutely, that was the tipping point. And if you translate the number of deaths in jumps racing this season to a flat race meeting, there'd be 4 deaths today at Sandown. There would have been 6 deaths yesterday at Seymour. The public of Victoria would be calling out for the entire industry to be shut down. So come on, Racing Victoria, get your act together, ban jumps racing.
So, Georgie, how influential do you think Mr Hull's voice will be in your campaign?
I think Rob's voice will be really influential in the campaign. People, of course, expect me to call for jumps racing to be banned, but what they don't realise is that it actually reflects the views of the majority of Victorians, and Rob speaking out today as former racing minister really sends that message home.
And the current racing minister, Anthony Carbine, said today he's waiting for the review of Racing Victoria. Is that good enough for you?
Well, I can understand him waiting for that review because they are an independent body, but we've had review after review after review and the deaths continue. So Racing Victoria, you've got to realise you have responsibility for the entire racing industry and it's being tarnished by these deaths.
As racing minister in 2010, you did suspend the sport, but it came back under a different government. Can you see any of the safety measures actually making much of an improvement?
There's been a whole range of safety measures put in place over the years and they haven't stopped the carnage. So the only way to stop the carnage is to stop jumps racing.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob Hulls and Georgie Purcell. A new move towards trying to ban jumps racing.
Nick, thank you. Inflation has fallen to 3.5% in July. With the share market's reaction, here's James Tao from ING.
Good afternoon. It was a negative response initially from the Australian share market after those inflation figures were released at 11:30 a.m. Sydney time. The benchmark index actually fell to its lowest levels of the day, down about 63 points. But as investors and also the market digested those figures, we saw the market come back. The ASX 200 closing the day flat at 8,071 points. Losses were predominantly among our communications, energy and also mining stocks, although consumer staples were a standout. That was certainly buoyed by Woolies and their profit results this morning. We actually saw Woolies shares up about 3% after announcing a special 40-cent per share dividend. Not so good for the likes of wagering business Tabcorp, down about 15% after slumping to a $1.36 billion loss. The Aussie dollar also came back from its earlier highs. It was above 68 US cents, finishing the day around 67.84 US cents for the Aussie market.
A new blood test can detect Alzheimer's disease before a patient even has symptoms. Melbourne engineers behind the device told Emma O'Sullivan the invention is set to revolutionise the way the disease is diagnosed worldwide.
Engineers at Monash University have invented this tiny handheld device. It will be used for a quick finger prick blood test looking for biomarkers of Alzheimer's disease, the most common form of dementia. It's a revolutionary change as Alzheimer's is currently diagnosed via brain scans or a lumbar puncture to take a sample of spinal fluid. This blood test removes the need for more complex pathology tests, showing results in just minutes. Detecting the disease early can have a big impact on treatment. Most patients are diagnosed at late stages of the disease, at which stage medications are of limited benefit.
Accurate diagnosis is very important, and a blood test that could achieve this would be a significant development.
With the test that we are using now, there is a wait time of 1 week to 2 weeks, and they cost a few thousands per sample or per test, whereas this one will give you results in a few minutes, and then it costs a couple of $100 at max.
The team behind the device hope it will be used by doctors worldwide in 3 to 5 years. They're now seeking federal funding to conduct clinical trials.
Still to come on 7 News, counting down to the footy finals with Geelong legend Billy Brownless. And as we take a live look at the city right now, a check of traffic and weather is just a few minutes away.
And then they win the next game.
Welcome back. As the only Victorian team to finish in the top 4, there are high hopes for Geelong this September. 8 days out from their qualifying final against Port Adelaide. Let's cross to 7 News sports reporter Kate Massey now, who's catching up with Cats legend Billy Brownless.
Well, we are here at Richmond Sporting Globe for the launch of footy finals. Well, your footy finals launch on Triple M.
Exactly.
Talk to us. What do you think the Cats can do this September, Bill?
I think they can go all the way. They've got a double chance, of course. Got to beat Port Adelaide over there, which is going to be tough. But I need a couple of old boys to stand up. So Reece Stanley and Patrick Dangerfield, if they stand up, play well, the Cats win that one. Then they go through to the grand final. Anything can happen.
What do you think? You would have loved to watch Jezza kick 9 on the weekend. Do you think he needs to stand up as well?
Well, he's going all right at the minute, Jezza, but he needs to just 5 or 6 next weekend, please. That'll be the go. And then the Cats get the win.
Now, JB,
Yes.
Who are you calling is going to be the most threatening this finals campaign?
Well, it shocked me for a start that Fat thinks the Cats are going to win because we expected a different answer from him. Hawthorn and the Western Bulldogs are the two best teams in it, and they're going to knock each other out, which is a great shame, actually, because they're both flying, but the winner of that game goes a very long way.
Now, who needs to step up there? I guess Hawthorn, they've got a few big players,
Yep.
3 of them named in the All-Australian squad. Who needs to...
Well, they've been unbelievable and so even. Their contribution comes from the whole 22. And for the Dogs, Fat, the big forwards are amazing. Sam Darcy's been incredible. Jamara Ugle-Hagan, big Naughty. Yeah, and in finals, you need the big boys jumping at the footy. So that is the game I reckon I'm most looking forward to.
That's what I found when the
you just
big
weren't
forwards
that big.
stand up. Yeah.
When Gary Ablett stood up, Geelong tended to win.
Now, timely that we mentioned that game. If people come down to the Sporting Globe, they can win tickets?
We've got tickets to give away to that game. Hawthorn, Western Bulldogs, you can't get them. You can only get them here at the Sporting Globe, Richmond, right now. So come on down and you'll be a chance to win those tickets.
Right, you've heard it here first. Come down to Richmond Sporting Globe. We'll have more details in the news at 6. Thank you both.
Kate, Billy, JB, thank you. Let's get an update now on the afternoon peak.
Good afternoon, it's Ian from the Lexus of Brighton Traffic Centre, and the speed limits of both the Westgate and Bolte bridges have been reduced to 60 k's an hour due to high winds. And for the Westgate Bridge, we're seeing delays outbound due to a breakdown on the bridge in the emergency lane. Looking to the Eastern Freeway, and there are heavy outbound delays due to an earlier crash at Elgar Road. Be no one else in the Lexus RX Hybrid, available now at Lexus of Brighton. Limited stock. Book your test drive with Lexus of Brighton today. LMCT 9879. Have a good night.
Now, very busy meteorologist Jane Bunn is back, and Jane, the winds finally ease soon.
Mike, not long now. We'll go from winds gusting 100 k's an hour to less than 30. Good for the clean-up that you may find when you get home. The city reached 18.6. Squally showers are passing through. When they hit, the wind is ferocious. Now, these are dropping temperatures. In the city now, it's just 11 degrees. The airport is 10. It feels like -4. Showers and damaging winds are mainly over southern Victoria. There are thunderstorms, but only right on the coast or offshore. The biggest gust in the west is Gellibrand, 133 k's an hour. In the east, the Prom has just hit 154. And just offshore, Hogan Island now up to 161. That's just shy of a Category 3 tropical cyclone. Not one, but two cold fronts are crossing Victoria. The last one is starting to move away, but we're left in this vigorous westerly airflow. Up next, high pressure. That'll bring us a break, but the next cold front races across the Bight with us in its sights. So thanks to the high, the wind will ease. We'll have a lengthy lull tonight and during the day tomorrow. The wind strengthens back to ferocious once again tomorrow night into Friday. Then there are further fronts over the weekend. Around the nation, there is heat to our north. Brisbane up and over 30 each day through to next Monday. 23 in Sydney tomorrow, up to 30 on Friday. To Victoria, showers linger near the west coast and along the ranges, easing in the afternoon. These ones here are not squally anymore. The wind does then rapidly increase from the west again later as a fresh burst of showers, turning to steady rain, arrives in the southwest corner at night. So in Melbourne, Thursday is our break. It is generally dry out there. There's just a slight risk of a brief shower. We should head down to 10 tonight and 17 for tomorrow. The winds are light to moderate during the day, nothing to worry about during the day, but then damaging wind gusts do return later at night, so more severe weather from tomorrow evening, Mike.
OK, been busy. Thanks, Jane. Looking ahead now to our next bulletin at 6, two teenagers charged, accused of using a machete in an armed robbery in Melbourne's east. Are you one of the Aussie workers being shortchanged on their superannuation? Meet the golfing couple who scored holes in one after the other. And we test Woolies' new high-tech trolleys, see how they work. Those stories and more are coming up in just over an hour. For now, from the 7 News team, thank you for joining us.
The 7 News app will give you the news you want every minute of every day, including breaking news alerts. Download the 7 News app now.